What's going on, guys? My name is Aaron Blackie, and in this video we're going to look at how you can create force disparity advantages with an understanding of the physical implications that the wall presents. I'm a black belt in BJJ and Judo, and I'm a current professional mixed martial artist fighting out of Australia.
Judo black belt, Jiu-Jitsu black belt.
If you haven't already, please support this channel by hitting that subscribe button, and we'll get started. Throughout the last era of contemporary mixed martial arts, people have passionately engaged in the BJJ versus wrestling debate as the best means of becoming an effective grappler. The reality is that neither accurately replicates the conditions in which MMA grappling takes place under. This is because of the trademark octagon walls. The caged walls have changed what grappling in combat sports is. It is not BJJ, nor it is wrestling. It is its own art form, verified by the statistical truth that about 80% of grappling in the UFC takes place along the caged walls. This is perhaps one of the least recognized and most impactful realizations that contemporary martial artists have discovered and yet pay little attention to. It transcends the context of the octagon. If you're in a fight, there's likely to be a wall, car, door, or some type of obstacle involved throughout the altercation. Learning how to exploit the positive and negative implications of the wall is a must for all martial artists that seek to be respected for their knowledge and understanding, proficiency in combat sports, and confidence in self-defense situations. We've created the following training series to teach you about the way the wall works and how you can exploit it to your advantage, both in offense and in defense.
Cage cutting is the first battle in the fight for controlling space, inhibiting movement of the opponent. So that really ends in the mount position, where you're on top of your opponent's chest, huge position of advantageous force disparity in which it's no longer a fair fight at all. So to do that, we need to start by imagining a central post in the middle of the room, ring, cage, whatever it is that you're fighting in. That needs to stay facing to your back at all times. Now what this is going to do is enable us to cut off the room. Okay, so our opponent is often going to give up space if they don't want to engage in a striking battle, and sit down and risk the clinch being established by one opponent. So outside striker fighters, those types really like to fight on the outside here. Now, that's a big problem, because if we don't cut them off, so we circle here, our opponent circles here, they move away from the wall, they can now continue to just pull back every time maybe we shoot or try and bridge into the clinch. So how do we get there? Well, we cage cut. So now if Jordan opts to circle out to this direction, I keep this central pole to my back by moving laterally. Okay, if I follow his circle, the pole is no longer faced to my back. So I've broken that basic rule. Straight line beats circular line. Circular line beats straight line, depending on how you employ these concepts. Now, if my opponent doesn't want to meet here engage because I've cut him off, he'll have to give up more space, eventually ending up on the wall where he has nowhere to run. In that situation, you can then bridge, you can create a clinch scenario, or you can exploit it by performing damaging strikes where your opponent's not able to give up space as a defensive mechanism. So here we have an example of using circles to combat circles, so it doesn't work. I've circled off to my left-hand side in order to stay in front of my opponent who circled to his left. It's kept me in front of him, yes, but what it's done is got him off the wall, so his movement is no longer inhibited. He's free to move wherever he likes. You can also see that imaginary center post is not exposed to my back. So we've broken that basic rule, and because of that, our opponent's been able to exit, no longer having their movement inhibited by any means. Okay, so getting the body lock from this pressure position, we're going to simply walk our opponent's hips side to side. So the great thing about the wall is our opponent can't break at the hips, so they can't bend over essentially like this, not letting us connect our hands around the hips. The wall is going to force them to stay straight, so it's very easily to make that mechanical lock, that lasso. Now the staggered stance does enable the opponent to break sideways parallel to the wall, and thereby stopping you from connecting the hands. That's why this frame, this pressure frame, or the structural frame, is very important, because it's inhibiting your opponent from creating a structure that stops us connecting the hands. So we've used our pressure, we've rocked side to side, and we've been able to make this mechanical lock here. The opponent's head is behind his hips. which we know greatly weakens his ability to produce force or deal with force. So from here we can simply perform some kind of garke trip or just walk him down to the floor. Now we're performing the body lock off the structure pinning mechanism. So before we looked at it with pressure, using our shoulder to drive the center of mass into the wall. Now we're using our structure, the underhook, head on the opposite side, and leg through the middle, structural position to connect our hands. So once our hands are connected, we have that mechanical lock, that lasso, and the wall will stop our opponent from being able to hide his hips by bending over here. What this structure does is stops our opponent defending by turning himself shoulder and hip to the wall, being perpendicular in position, which is actually going to stop us getting that head behind the hips, okay? So our head must be on the opposite side to the underhook. If it's not, Jude will bring this head down here and he'll actually have a structure that hides his hips. So from here, he's pinned. We can then start to rock side to side, creeping his hands closer and closer until we make our lock. So again, once we have our lock, the wall makes it very easy for us to get that head behind the hips. Okay, that's really the key here. Again, you can perform any kind of garke hooking trip, or once the head's behind the hips, really, you can just walk your opponent down to the floor. So now employing the wall technical get-up. So we've built our frame, we had our head and hands inhibiting our opponent's head from coming up above ours, and we're looking to build our base for our center of mass now. So that means getting ankle, knee, and hip back on the floor where we can use them to produce force. So we start with a C grip on the neck, aiming to get our knee built up to the floor. So that's bringing that femur joint back into play. Now, it's very important to get the order right. We must use this post here, not a whizzer at this stage. If we go to a whizzer at this stage, our opponent will drive this shoulder in to our center of mass with an underhook, and we will remain pinned to the floor. So to stop that, we use the C grip on the head. Once the knee is extracted, we then move to a whizzer. Okay, so we can see that transition there. I built up onto the knee, and I then put in a whizzer. That's very important. If I stay on the head in this position, nothing stops my opponent from circling and taking a rear body lock. So once we've transitioned to the whizzer on one knee, we then build up onto both feet. We come up on both feet and we begin employing our normal single leg standing wall defenses. That means a whizzer, a crossface, and our shoulder or our head inside of our opponent's head, depending on how you line up basically your height compared to your opponent's. From there, we look at breaking the grip and circling out.
Remember, grappling in mixed martial arts is not BJJ and it is not wrestling. It is a unique art of its own, and the sooner you embrace it as a separate art form, the sooner you will increase your level of effectiveness in this context. Most of the innovations we are seeing in MMA are due to the unique level of openness in the rule set. So remember what Bruce Lee famously said about style. No style is style. I hope you got something out of this tutorial, and if you'd like to learn more about how you can exploit the wall, head over to FIGHTIQ, where we've put together an entire course teaching over 25 wall tactics and techniques.
Rocky Balboa, yeah, I got to fight like Rocky Balboa. Yeah, I got to fight.